Are you
All
seeing
right.
okay, good morning. Are you guys seeing the sample bill schools inventory instance though? Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to be sure because when I was trying to share it, my screen, I wasn't sure I was all the way into the software. So, good morning. We are going to be talking about everybody's like favorite thing this morning, which is inventory, right? And I find it kind of dry myself, but um, we do have to do it, especially if we're doing GAP. We're basically going to go over fiscal year end procedures, but I am going to touch upon the whole system in general just a little bit because I've had a few districts reach out that they need some help. If you need individual help adding items or doing things, please send in a ticket and we will be happy to help you though. So I am in a Sampleville City Schools here and it is scrambled data. So there's a few weird things in it. It is in fiscal year 2020 as the current year, which is way behind, obviously. So you will mostly be working probably in fiscal year 2024. So when you first log in, you're at home. I want to talk about a few things under core because they're pretty important. And then we'll move on to the fiscal year end stuff. Um, and forgive me if this is a little redundant, but under core, you have all your different types of codes. Asset classes state defined. You have no control over those. However, these other ones were defined by your district at some time in the past. It was probably in classic. But you have control over these as well. I basically also want to touch on things like condition codes because that's optional. And I'll have people call and say, oh, I can't put a condition on. Well, maybe you don't have any in here. You can create one and add a new one. So if you're not happy with just fair, good, and poor, and you want excellent or something else, you can create your own type of code, whatever you want to call it, and add one. So keep that in mind if you're going through some of the fields and you don't have what you need. I have found that a couple times with districts with disposition codes. I had one that said, well, we sold it, but sold isn't an option for me. I can't put that I sold it. Well, she just had to go to core disposition codes and add sold. And there's two in here. But so keep that in mind as well. Also under core, we have our funds. I want to touch upon this one. This has been an issue for some people. Under funds, you have a type. And this is how the items appear and all your totals are on all the reports the GAP people get. It's a lot of times it's broken down by fund type, and that's what they want if they're doing your GAP conversion and doing your financial statements. And whatever fund it is in here is what category it will be in. Funds in here are not necessarily where the item was purchased from. It is where the item is being used under. So keep that in mind when you're putting a fund on items. And the reason that's important is that an item could have been bought from two different funds. Maybe you had a PO that the general fund paid for half of it and your PI fund paid for half of it, but it was a freezer and it's going to go in the cafeteria. So you're going to want to put 006 on it. So items can only have one fund, but they could have been bought from more than one fund. So keep that in mind as well. Also under core, we have our fiscal years. And this is pretty important because this is like your posting periods in USAS and payroll. You activate them this month, it's a whole year at a time. And whatever your dollar limit is for capitalization criteria and life limit, if you have a life limit, that is listed on every single year. So if it ever changes and goes up, you'll be able to see the history. Oh, it used to be 3,000. Now we're capitalizing at 5,000 or whatever. So all the fiscal years will be in here. You have the same icons you have in USAS. The hover overs don't work yet, but you can tell this is like to close a year, to open a year, you know, etc. You can tell what they're supposed to do. And this is make current. They're going to add the hover overs. They're just not there yet. Okay. So my cap limit in this district is 3,000. I can also go to system capitalization criteria, and I can see it there as well. The capitalization criteria, keep in mind, is approved by the Board of Education. You can't just say, oh, I think I'll raise it. You have to have the board approve it at a board meeting to raise it. Also, if you're ever going to change it, definitely tell your GAP person first. Don't just change it without telling your GAP preparer, oh, by the way, we're going to change our capitalization criteria. Okay, they'll need to know that so they can restate and do some things. Okay, so that is where all of these codes are. I'm not going to do a whole lot of transaction stuff. If you need help adding an item, please reach out. We're happy to help you. Under transactions, we have acquisitions and dispositions. You can see all your acquisition records here, okay? But when you're adding an item, keep in mind when you go to add it, it will take you first to an acquisition, and then it will continue to item. You can only put one acquisition, and then you continue to item, you finish adding the item. If you need a second acquisition for your item, in other words, there were two different POs involved with it, or two different checks or whatever, really just POs, because you could just increase the dollar amount, I think, yeah, if you really needed to on the acquisition, you would go to an item, just go to an active item at least, and here, add acquisition, and you can add more money to the original cost of that item. The original cost is always, there it is. The original cost is always the total of all the acquisitions that made up this particular item. That's what it always is. If you need to lower an amount for some reason, you can enter a negative acquisition. So if you need help with any of that, let us know as well. So I'm going to look at an item really quickly just to go over a couple fields, just to help you as we start running reports with what they are. Okay, so obviously you have a tag number, secondary tag is optional. Here, this will be checked if this item is capitalized. In other words, it's at your limit or higher. Okay, you have, of course, your description. A lot of times appraisal tag is blank. That's if the company put some type of a tag on it. Accessories is optional, as is serial number and model number, of course. Entity ID is if you want a certain building associated with it. I don't think I know anybody using that. I will mention on entity ID that I know that some auditors or GAP people, especially LGS, local government services, that is a division of the state auditor's office that does GAP conversions. They often use entity ID because some reports allow you to exclude or include entity IDs. So sometimes I've seen districts where they do, exclude maybe an entity ID from reports. So here, the fund, the function, and the asset class can never be changed once they're set on an item. Those three fields, that would be a transfer. And that is so GAP reports will show it as a transfer. That's the reason. So I cannot edit those at all in here. Organizational code is optional. That's just basically if you use those, which a lot of districts do, but they would have been set up. Location, condition, again, this district didn't even put any, and this is scrambled data. So you have a replacement cost and insurable value. That is often the same as the original cost. However, I have seen districts increase this insurable value over time. If things have gone up and if I need to replace it, hey, it's going to cost me a lot more now to buy a new one, basically. I will add to keep in mind that if you add one item with only one acquisition, and then you add acquisition up here, like I come back in and I say, I need to add another $1,000 or whatever. There's another acquisition record that makes up the original cost of this item. It will not automatically do replacement cost or insurable value. You'll have to increase those as well if you need to. The depreciation is down here. We all use straight line now. I think the other one's there, but I've never seen anyone use it. And the beginning date will pop in for you. This is where you need to put a life expectancy. and maybe a salvage value, usually not. In a lot of districts, you will see some depreciation transactions over years. I don't know if any of you have any yet. Again, this is a demo, so I don't have any. But once you close some years, you should. Oh, two other things in here that are important for reports. This life to date depreciation, that particular field right there is always based on the last fiscal year that I closed. So it's not updated yet for the current fiscal year. It will update when I close. But the book value report and the changes in depreciation report, they will show through the year that you have not closed yet. They will show through the current year. So that's why you don't necessarily have to close right away. You can still give the auditors or the GAAP people all the reports they need. So that's important to know without closing. And this beginning balance, this was a hidden field in Classic, but this is the balance of this item at the beginning of the fiscal year. New, they will be zero because they didn't exist when you started this fiscal year. So those are just some fields that I feel are important for you to understand as far as closing. Okay, this is basically a fiscal year end meeting, so I'm not going to go over more about items, but you are going to want to ensure that all items have been added for the fiscal year. This basically means that the items were received, and I also believe paid for by June 30th. You can refer to the fiscal year end checklist that you should have a copy of. But that just says if they were received by June 30th. I was told by my GAAP people that, let's say that everything wasn't paid for yet until August or something, a lot of times they would wait till the next fiscal year to add it, even if we already had the item. So my caveat to that is ask your GAAP preparer. If there's something that you received in June and you paid for it in July, and you're like, okay, I don't have this acquisition record to add because we didn't pay for it until July. Ask the GAAP people which year to put it in. You're paying them. They're your guru. Go to them and ask them which fiscal year if you're in question. You will have items in pending items, or you should. If you do not have anything in pending, you will need to click on the pull from USAS and attempt to pull them. When you invoice in Redesign or in SC View, the field should be set to either automatically add your 600 object codes to the pending or prompt you whether it should be added or not for 500s and 600s. I don't know how every district is set up that way. It is a configuration in USAS and in SC View. But if you have nothing in here and you attempt to pull from USAS, let us know if you're having an issue. I cannot do it in here because the demo is not connected to a USAS, but you would put a date in here, probably 7/1 of 23, to start back on that date, okay? And you would put in a date, and you would test the connection first, and if that was worked fine, you would confirm. The include rejected means that you pulled something once, you deleted it from here, and you want to pull it again because you're like, oh, shoot, I do need to add that item. That is when you would check this box. So normally not. So let us know if you need help with that. One thing to keep in mind is to add items. They do not necessarily have to exist in the pending. Let's say you need to add an item, but uh-oh, it's not in my pending. Okay, so here's the items that are in pending. When I click on one of them, all it does is make my acquisition a heck of a lot easier to add because here's all my stuff. It gives me the account number, vendor, the amount, all of that. Very helpful. These fields over here will be blank until you continue to item and put them in. Remember, here's the fund it was bought out of, $4.99. Well, maybe I want a different fund on the actual item itself. You cannot add those here. Okay. So it makes it easier for me to add an item. Continue to item. And here, the acquisitions already exist for me. And now I would just add the rest of the things that I need to add, and I would save the item. Okay? I say keep that in mind because I'll have districts concerned about that, which, I mean, yes, you definitely want, it would be very nice to have it all pop in for you. But if I don't want to do that, I can just say, okay, here's the tag number, and I can type in an account number. I can just say, oh, this isn't the account. I want 001, blah, 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 blah. And that can be very simplistic. It can just be general fund. You have to put in an amount, though. It will not add it without an amount. So you'll have to put that. I don't even think you have to put vendor, etc., but a lot of districts do go ahead and put that in. Okay, so you can just physically add an acquisition record. It does not have to be in pending. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind at fiscal year end is to dispose of any items that left your district this year. So if you know you traded in a bus, or you know that someone sold an item, or something got lost or stolen, God forbid, or destroyed or disposed of in any fashion, you will go into dispositions and do a create and actually create a disposition to dispose of the item. Okay. And you'll pick, of course, you can start typing and I believe it will filter. I believe it will filter. Well, now I'm not sure, but you would pick an item. No, I guess not. No, it did. It started to. Anyway, you'll pick an item that you want to dispose of. This is again, scrambled data, kind of weird. You'll want the correct disposition date. It must be in an open fiscal year. In this case, probably fiscal year 24, so I don't want to put 8/14. And you'll put how you disposed of it, which type here. Again, if it doesn't exist, you just have to go to core dispositions and add the code. And if you got any money for it, you would put in an amount received. Authorized by, I often would put initials of somebody like the maintenance guy or whoever if we disposed of something. So anyway, just be sure you dispose of items. One other question I get a lot with inventory is if someone says, hey, there's nothing in my pending, or, there's 3 items in my pending, but I know we got more than that. I know we bought more stuff than that. Well, one thing you can do is go into USAS and run a BUDLED, which is a budget account activity report. You can run that and run it just for your 600s. It may be long, but it may not be that long for just 600s. And someone can go through that report and just look through and see, oh yeah, we forgot this roof or we forgot this, I don't know what, a mower, or we forgot something big that we bought. That is local to every district. Everyone does that different. Some districts have a really high cap limit now, like 10,000 or whatever, and they're not keeping track in here of all of their computers and all that. Their IT person is keeping a spreadsheet maybe of all that data, so they don't want to add all that stuff in here. So just keep that in mind. You can add it without a pending item, but you don't want to miss anything. And when your gap people come or your auditors, they may want proof like, okay, are you sure you got everything added that needed to be added? So just keep that in mind. Okay, another thing you're going to want to do before running reports is to make sure that your capitalization criteria is correct in the system with what the board has approved. And keep in mind, it's both a dollar amount, so anything 3,000 and higher. And a lot of districts do have a life limit. Like if it's only going to last 1 year or 0, for God forbid, I don't care about it. But if it's going to last 5 years or more, then it's capitalized. So keep that in mind. You may start running reports at any time after you're finished updating your inventory. I recommend not closing the year until the gap conversion and financial statements have been created and and audited. I personally had it one time where my gap preparers went through something and had me either add something or not add something. I can't even remember. We did something different with an item, and back in Classic, I had not closed, but if I had, I would have had to go back to a backup, or something. Here you can reopen, but it could be, I don't know, a tad cumbersome to reopen. And since the reports will give you the data they need without closing, that's just my recommendation, but that's up to you. Under core fiscal years, you can go ahead and create 2025, even with 2024 open, if you want to. If you decide to do that because you want to go ahead and start adding items for fiscal year 2025, just keep in mind that the life-to-date depreciation listed right on the item will not be right, nor will the beginning balance, because it hasn't been updated from closing 2024 if you have not closed 2024. And that makes total sense. So that's the only thing just to keep in mind, but you probably don't really care about that at this point. But you can certainly create 2025 and start adding some items if you want to. So let's get down to reports. You go over to reports, and this is the group of reports, usually a lot of the ones your gap people want. They'll probably want book value and a couple others, but they'll definitely want all the gap reports. So if you hover over gap reports, you'll see those 4 over at the right. A couple things to keep in mind with gap reports is they are all canned reports. I'll go to the source one. Whoops. They are all canned reports. In other words, you can't edit them and change them and do stuff to them like we can in the report manager. They're all canned. They're all located here, and they're all created in PDF format only. You cannot get a spreadsheet of these. Thank God they have updated a lot of the others, like book value, where you can now get PDF or CSV. That's been very helpful for audit and for gap people. So you can get it with some of the others now, but you cannot get, you can only get a PDF. Keep in mind that gap reports by default are already filtered to only include the items that are capitalized. You don't have to say include capitalized. It will already do that. So gap reports will exclude anything that does not meet your capitalization criteria. They will also automatically exclude items that are disposed of, inactive, or old tag item as the status. So you're basically going to get active, and there's a couple more, I think new and asset item held for sale or something, which I don't think I've ever seen anybody use those, but they will exclude disposed of, inactive, and old tag item. Gap reports will also exclude any items that are coded as having an operating lease on them. In other words, you're leasing them. If you are leasing them, you don't really own them yet, so they will exclude them. Here is where I talked about the entity ID. If your gap people say, oh, I want you to exclude some kind of entity ID, that's where you would type it in here. So I ran a few reports I didn't want to have to do them right when we're on this, and now I can't see all of where they are because the meeting's in the way. I ran some because, let me move the meeting if I can. Ran a few because I didn't want to have to run them live. And I can't find my source report. Well, I'm afraid to run the source report this morning. Oh, there, I got it moved. This morning when I was, moves right back. When I was in the demo and I was trying to run a couple reports, this actually went down on me twice. And I was like, oh my gosh, thanks a lot. I was really worried it would go down. So I asked a district I called a district real quick who's on this call, I believe. And I said, if it goes down, can I please use your district? And she graciously said yes. So see, I think there's something going on with this that it's not going. Okay, I'm trying to move the meeting and I can't. Oh, shoot. Oh, here we go. Okay. Let me see if I can find the source one. I ran like 10 reports this morning. Here it is.
Sandra, you just unshared your screen.
That's what I was afraid of. I'll do it again. Hang on. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Share, share. Okay, let me know when you're seeing the correct thing.
You're good.
Okay. This is the schedule of fixed assets by source. This is what it will look like. Um, and I'm not trying to be weird here, but honestly, when my Gap people asked for reports, I just ran everything they wanted and gave it to them. I mean, I might have looked through them a little bit, but this is schedule of fixed assets by source. The thing to keep in mind with this report is it is by source. It is not by the fund that is listed on the item. A lot of times they're the same, but remember we talked about fund, okay? And we said an item can be purchased from one fund, but it can be used under another fund. So my permanent improvement fund bought a freezer, but the freezer doesn't have 003 on it. It has 006. The acquisition record has 003, but the item itself has 006. So it's being used under 006. So this is based on acquisitions. So just keep that in mind. That is what that means, the one by source. Okay, so keep that in mind. They're going to ask for that report. The other one they will ask for is this fixed assets by fund and class. There are 3 ways to run this report, and I'm going to look at my notes for a minute on it. They are going to ask for you to run them all 3 ways. There's a schedule by function and class. There's one just by class, and then there's a summary by schedule and class. I recommend, or they recommend, SSDT does all running all of them, okay? Because they're probably going to ask for all of them. And I can't get to it because the meeting's in the way. I don't know how to move this meeting controller. Rhonda, do you know how to move the meeting controller? It's in the way of all my reports.
Yeah, sometimes if you like click, hold, and drag it over,
That's what
that
I
will
just
work.
did. Yeah. Let
Yeah,
me
I thought you
drag it
tried that
way. Oh, I
already.
dragged it far away. Thank you, Rhonda. I dragged it like a
Okay.
million miles away. Thank you. So this was one that I ran. This is pretty short because it's a summary of the schedule of fixed assets by function and class. So you have the function, and I believe that when your financial statements are done, that a lot of them will will want that by function so they can look, but keep in mind, you also have subtotals by the fund type. Remember, we talked about where the fund type is. It's fiduciary, proprietary, or whatever, and those are all on the funds. I see something in the chat. Can it be run in a bundle? No, not right now. I believe that that's coming, like to do bundles, but I don't even want to say why because they have a lot of things that are under the, other things that they're doing on their timeline. I think Liz Dunn just asked that, but you know what? I will ask SSDT if anyone has possibly created that, but we don't really have a bundle option in inventory yet. I will say one thing you could do in all fairness is you could close the fiscal year. That will run a huge amount of reports. And if you want to see everything that's in the bundle, in the documentation, there is a whole, it tells you every single one that will be there. So that is a workaround if you want to do it that way. Okay, here is another one, a schedule. This is just by class, that second option. And it's a lot smaller because it's only by asset class. It's not by every single function. So the totals are, it's just all totaled. So that's another one. And then here is the schedule by fixed assets by function and class. Now you have both. So I have function 1100 and then I have every single class within that function. So they will want all 3. Your Gap preparers will. Okay, after that, we have the one that's called changes in fixed assets report. This one simply shows exactly what changed in your fixed assets. Oh, I had one more note. I'm sorry, I apologize. On the one on function in class, I have a note here to mention. that if you get an error, we have some common errors on these. If you get an error that says you have an invalid function or an invalid class, there's ways to deal with them. We can do a transfer and actually fix it and move it out of a function that doesn't exist into one that does. That is common if an item was added a long time ago, maybe. So if you get anything like that, let us know and we'll help you with that. So again, this one changes in fixed assets. This can be run in summary or detail, and it can also be run, of course, 3 different ways. Um, it's, boy, they're recommending to run it every single way. I will say it doesn't take that long because I ran them all again this morning and it didn't take a super long time. One thing I do not like about these reports, just to be honest with you, is you cannot control the title of the report. I can't call it summary or whatever. They're all going to be called the same thing. So because of that, if I were you and I was running this, I might do fund and summary, okay, and run it, and then go right to my downloads and change it to fund summary, or something like that so that I know what they all are. You can also show report options and that will help some, not completely. Okay, change in fixed assets. Let's see if I can find that one. That's change in depreciation. Well, maybe I didn't run change in, I thought I ran them all. Sorry about that. I ran them all the other day when I was preparing. Oh, this is it, schedule of change, that's it. And then they all went away, so I had to rerun. Okay, this is the detail. So just keep in mind, if you run the detail, it will show you every single tag, which is crazy, and who wants that? But believe it or not, a lot of GAAP auditors do want that. So if you do change just the summary, and here's the summary, it's all totaled and it should probably be only one page. So that's going to simplify it a lot. So basically, if you have a problem and you look at the summary and it's in a certain item, like, oh, it's the general fund, or oh, it's 506 has an issue, then you would look at the detail to look at exact items that are affecting all of these amounts. Okay. And again, the auditors like these. It starts with the beginning value. From there, it adds any acquisitions for the current fiscal year you're dealing with. Anything that was disposed of would be in this column. Anything that was transferred in other words, I did a transfer from one fund to another, or one function, or whatever. So again, this one's by fund, so I'm seeing the fund. So if I transferred into 200, it would be here. If I did a transfer out of this particular fund, it would be here. If I did any error adjustments, which, if you recall, if you do an acquisition and add an acquisition to an existing item, you can check a box called error adjustment. Also, if you do a transfer, there is an error adjustment that you can check. So if you did one of those type of things with an error adjustment, it would be in this column, and then you have an ending balance. I saw question about the detail report, and I do believe there is a total at the very, very bottom. It's just a lot longer report. See down here the subtotals and then grand total. So it does total, it's just way, way at the bottom. And there is a subtotal. So, yep, good questions. Good question. Thank you for pointing that out. So that is the changes, the schedule of change in fixed assets. And again, this is by fund, and you can run it, but they'll probably want you to run it all those different ways. I did not run it by the other two this morning. And I don't want to, because I don't want the instance to go down on me. And again, this is where if your auditors or your GAAP people say to include or exclude any entities, you would do that. They will definitely want these reports. Okay, so far so good. The last one under the GAAP reports is the changes in depreciation. So here I am on this one. I did run a couple of these. This is pretty different compared with the others. To me, the others are totals of things. Okay. this is how did my depreciation change? Okay. So when I run this, I can run it again by fund, function, asset class, and I can get a detail or a summary. Okay. Recommended to run it all three ways. Okay. So let's see where those are. Now, forgive me, this is Fayetteville's, but she's the one that said, oh, if the system goes down, you can use mine, which I'm forever grateful. But because I was afraid it would go down and I was running these this morning, I ran theirs. So everybody gets to see your depreciation, Lisa. So, um, so this is by fund. Okay. And this is the summary. So when this says beginning depreciation right now, and I'm in an old, or no, in Fayetteville, she's in fiscal year 24. So whatever fiscal year I'm in, the current year. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, you have 2022 current, which is fine because you were working on all kinds of stuff with your auditors and everything I remember. So anyway, you'll know what year it is. It doesn't matter. But it's the beginning depreciation. And then continuing items simply means everything that was already there when you started the fiscal year that already existed. From there, anything you added this year, anything you disposed of this year, again, any transfers in or out, error adjustments, and then there's my ending depreciation. Okay. And again, when the auditors or GAAP people get this, this is for the current year, what the depreciation will be when you close. But if you add them all up right now from the items, it would be this beginning one. So that's what you just have to keep in mind with all of this. If you don't close, you still have all these, but the reports will reflect the total depreciation, how it will be when you end. And here is the detail. Long. Well, I guess it's only 13 pages, but it's not terrible. But again, it will have totals at the bottom, which will equal the summary. I don't like the 0 at the end. Oh, that's just error adjustment. I apologize. You know what? I don't think there is the ending depreciation or beginning. On this one, there's not. And I really did not know that, to be honest with you. So I'm glad we looked. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of reports. So it doesn't take that long though. Like if you just start running one, get some coffee, go run another one. Again, I don't like the fact that they're all called the same thing. As you can see, like when I'm looking at this changes of schedule of change in depreciation report, schedule of change in depreciation report. Well, thank you very much, which is the summary, which is the detail. I can't tell from the title. Okay, and I know that's coming later to you to be able to name it what you want. But for now, you might want to rename in your downloads. That's probably what I would do. Okay. So those are the change schedules in fixed assets and in depreciation. There are also non-GAAP reports that are down here that you can run. I will tell you that your GAAP person will probably want a book value report. That seems to be one that they often want. For your own use, you could certainly run the pending item report. I do want to touch upon the audit report. I'm not going to run one because it's pretty long. Takes like a year. No, I'm sorry. It takes a while. So if you run the demand, all that really means is that there is like a date stamp and a signature block on it where the treasurer can sign off on it. I'm sorry, not the demand, the official. I apologize. An official will have that. You can run it for a date range. Something to keep in mind on the audit report is that if I put 7/1/23 through 6/30/24 as my start and stop date, that will be based on the date you did it. So the date, if you do it all in August, like let's say I do a whole bunch of stuff for inventory in August, it won't be on the audit report because the audit report is what I did from 7/1 to 6/30. Does that make sense? That's just how the audit report works. So if you really want an audit report, which I don't know who wants that, if an auditor wants one, they may still want it for just the fiscal year 24, or you could run it out to 8/20 or 8/31/24 if you really wanted everything you did. It's quite lengthy, but you can choose users and sorts and all of that kind of stuff. So let's look at the book value report. The book value report is pretty important to the whole system because it's what, your book value is as of the end of this fiscal year, which is part of your financial statements that people are so interested in, right? Not really, but if you're ever going for a bond, and you're getting a bond rating, those investors, people would be interested in that. So it is part of your financial statements. That's why it's important. Um, so something to keep in mind with the book value report. Remember earlier, we said that the GAAP report is automatically filtered. It automatically is only active items. It's only capitalized items. This book value report is not like that. The book value report in Classic was, I believe, already filtered, and this one is not. So if you're going to run a book value, you only want active. If you run it for everything, you're going to get huge, huge amounts of disposed of. Now, the documentation will say to also include new and excess asset not in use. So if you use those two, by all means, include all three, and you just check it and it'll check both like that. I never used those other statuses, so that wasn't something I was worried about. And I think I set this, and that's why it already says active, or I did active. Okay, here is where capitalized, this is important because it defaults to both. And you want capitalized. And here, and it says plus two others up here, but here's capitalized, okay? So you can choose what you want here as far as the percent of depreciation or last year of useful life remaining. All is actually defaulted to, so I would use that. Sort is up to you and or your GAAP preparer. I think a lot of people use tag number, but I don't want to say because you might want asset class. I've seen that too, that an auditor or a person wants that. Again, I really like that you can do PDF or CSV in here. I really like that because if they want the CSV, you can get it for them. So I ran a book value. Oh, it's Fayetteville again. But here's her book value report. It's 24 pages long. Okay, and I will go down to the bottom and you can see totals. So if, let's say that your total book value report does not equal some of those GAAP reports, and your GAAP preparer wants to know why, or they're looking through why that's not true. Again, be sure you're running this capitalized only. I've seen that many times where that's on both. So that's kind of important to remember, to run it capitalized and active, so you don't get more items than you want on here. Okay, let's see. Something else that I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I have a note here. On the schedule of fixed assets by function in class, sorry that was scattered a little bit. On this one, I forgot to mention, let's see, if I do it by, let's see which one it is. If I do it by this one, the summary, down here, you have a couple options. You have book value or original cost. You cannot get both. So you have to choose. Of course, they're recommending to run it by both. Very irritating. But if you run it by one or the other, be sure to save the name. They're both going to be called the same thing. And believe it or not, and not to be mean or anything, but if you check this, it won't even show on the options because I tested that. And I looked at my options page and it just says summary. It doesn't tell me which one I chose there. So I had to write it on there. This one was book value. This one was, let's see what the other one is, original cost. So just something to keep in mind. Other reports that are out there, you can get a location worksheet, and I've been told that they have updated that so that it's a lot better to break down by location, the page break by location. I think before you couldn't get that, and you can now, so you can give it to people if you want to see that things are in their rooms or whatever. And they, of course, also you can do CSV, which is very, very helpful if you want to do it that way. Trying to think if there's any other reports I really want to talk about. Let's see. Um, the fiscal year ending balances report. This will give you what everything looks like at fiscal year end, so you could get that before you close if you want it. It's kind of like the report that EIS Close gave you in Classic. And the depreciation posting is the same thing. It will give you what's going to be posted as depreciation. So you could just do a few of those and see if any of them, are things that they want. But that's all the notes I had on those particular ones. Let's see if I have anything else in my notes here. Okay. When you've run everything they want and you've emailed it to them or kept copies or whatever, and when you are really ready to close, which could be sooner, could be later, you would go to core fiscal years. Okay. And you would simply click the close to close a fiscal year. It will ask you, are you sure? Okay. And there's no maybe, it's either yes or no. And you would say yes, that you're ready to close. Behind the scenes, it will run that bundle of reports that we talked about in a zipped file. So where it will go, I believe is under, oops, it's not there. It's under core configuration right here. Who is the bundle going to? It can be one address or more than one. I believe that we have set this all up for everybody already, but if you've had a change in staff, or treasurer, or whatever, and you want it, or you want to put an auditor's email address in there, I guess, or someone who is doing your gap, let us know if you need help with that. Okay. But that's where the reports will go. So you would go ahead and close the fiscal year. I'm not going to do it because I don't know how long it'll take or if it will go down. But the things that happen when you close is that it advances that last closed fiscal year under core configuration. So where we just were under core configuration, last fiscal year closed is right here. It will change that to 6/30 of 24, whatever. It will add 1 year's worth of depreciation to that life to date depreciation field that's on the items. So that LTD depreciation, which is right here. And it will update the beginning balances for new fiscal year on the item record. Remember, we talked about this field, which you cannot update or change in any fashion and was not there in Classic, but they added it in redesign, to help out. So this is the beginning of the fiscal year. It will change that dollar amount. So that's about all. That's what it will do when you close. Okay. Under help documentation, there is a ton of documentation, like more than you ever want. Sorry, but there is just, oh my gosh, it's like more than you'd ever want. I mean, it's a lot, it's great. It's wonderful. But you can get a lot here. You can search for a certain word. It's pretty easy to search our documentation. But if you go to reports, it will give you what Classic and Redesign's reports were. If any of your GAP people are still asking for EIS 103, or whatever, it will give you what they are. It will also go to the bundle and it will show you some things about how to set it up for the email, but also it will tell you what is included in the bundle right here, which is a lot, kind of an exhausting list of reports. So that's what will be in there. Rhonda, is there anything in the chat? I think you said something and it went away on my screen, but was there any questions or anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize on the part where you have the configuration, where if there's any changes in the district, a new treasurer, assistant treasurer, whoever is supposed to get those reports, that you let us know by help desk ticket so that we can get that updated for you and it goes to the right person. So otherwise it might not go to anybody, and that's not good. You have to get them out through the file archive. Also, we have a report in USAF that we used several years ago that we can generate, and this is really great in Excel, and you can just kind of review through the year and just double check that, yes, we've capitalized everything that we need to capitalize. That's in USAF. Just ask us and we can help you with that. And then I did have, I think one of my popular questions from a district was if they have an acquisition with a trade-in value, such as they're buying a bus, trading in another bus, the cash for that is going to be different than what the value should be. So if they're buying a bus for 100,000, trading in a bus for 10,000, they might be paying 90,000 for the cash, and then but when it comes in for the capitalization, that should be capitalized at its full $100,000 value, correct?
That's how I always did it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if we traded in a bus though, I would dispose of that traded in bus with a
Yes.
disposition record and trade, and there's a
Hmm.
way to put the amount you received for that bus. That's how I did it. And
Okay.
I was never questioned on that.
Yep.
And some of those kind of questions, if you have a weird question on an item, honestly, use your gap prepare because they're the ones, if they tell you, no, do it this way, they're familiar with the GASB rules, you know what I mean, and all that, and that's what you're paying them for. And then when the auditors come, why'd you do it this way? You know, you can say that that was a recommendation of our gap preparers. You're paying for their expertise. So I would ask them if you have, you know, odd things or odd questions and stuff like that. Are there any other questions on anything that I didn't cover? Again, this was really just a fiscal year end thing, not a whole training on adding items and disposing of items and transfers. But if you need help, we're happy to, you know, get on a meeting or a Zoom with you and help you.
I'm
I
not
know it's
seeing
very exciting
anything in the
stuff.
chat. And of
Like
course,
I said, I
we'll
find
be
it kind of
saving this.
dry, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll be saving this meeting and posting it on HCC's website in our normal spot. That will be saved in our YouTube videos with a direct link to that. So if you'd like to kind of review or maybe, oh, I missed this spot and it got interrupted, you can review that again on HCC's website through the link to the YouTube.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your attention.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, everyone.